Welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast, where we feature conversations with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and artists. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Agents of Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Francisco Gonzalez, and we have here with us today a really great guest, Enrique Buero, who is coming in here on this interview all the way from Montevideo, Uruguay. So we're on the other side of the equator. This might be the first podcast I've done across the equatorial divide. So Enrique, welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Good morning, Francisco, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Well, Enrique, to introduce you to our audience a little more, he is the general manager and member of the board of directors of Parque de las Ciencias, a free trade zone located just a few minutes from the international airport there in Montevideo, Uruguay. He's been in this role since 2013, and he's also a board member and president of the Uruguayan Chamber of Free Trade Zones. Between 2002 and 2013, Enrique also acted as legal counsel and in-house lawyer for different pharmaceutical companies, including Merck Sereno and Megalabs. And we had the chance to visit Megalabs and the Parque de la Ciencia when I took a group down there in March for the Fearless Journeys group trip to Uruguay. So that's exciting. But Enrique is also a graduate of the Universidad of Montevideo. So Enrique, again, welcome. Again, as I mentioned, Fearless Journeys visited your free trade zone there in Uruguay and received a private tour. We had an excellent tour guide in Julio Martinez, very passionate, very enthusiastic about everything you're doing there. And that definitely was conveyed to everybody in our group. We had such a great time, and everybody was so fascinated by what is going on there that we wanted to share your story with more people through this podcast. So, Enrique, first, this is probably a new concept for a lot of people listening, but what exactly is a free trade zone? How many of them exist in Latin America, if you have any answers to that, and specifically Uruguay, and what makes yours unique?
Okay, excellent. Thanks again, Francisco, and happy to hear that the visit was a good one. And for sure, Julio has a lot of energy, and I'm sure he was a good host during the tour. For people to understand, a free trade zone it's a space or location within the country where we have special benefits to be able to bring foreign investment into the country. And those benefits are, in our case, mainly on two pillars. One is absolute legal security for these projects. Uruguay is a country with a long-standing trademark on legal security, political stability, economical stability, social stability. And the free trade zones are a reflect of that in general that the country has and that the country really promotes as one of its long-standing trademarks. The other thing we offer through the regime is the tax benefits and customs benefits for these companies to come and operate here and operate from Uruguay, but looking towards the region and the world. And in order for them to come, and because the Uruguayan local market is a small one, you need to give some incentives to these companies to come here, hire human resources from Uruguay, and provide services and goods to the region and the world. That's the main objective that the free trade zone regime has here in Uruguay. And it's to, as I said before, to be able to bring foreign direct investment into the country, which is really important for us being a rather small country. On the second question is how many free trade zones we have in Latin America, probably around 500.
Wow, 500.
Yeah, and in the world you have 5,000. So
wow.
It's a huge number. And it's that's an important piece of information because we are competing with these free zones in the world. In this global, world, we're all competing against each other, mainly in services because services can be provided from different locations. You don't need to be close to any market to be able to provide services to that market. And that makes our free trade zones really competitive, and they need to be really competitive to be able to continue to bring foreign investment into this country. We have 14 free zones here in Uruguay. Uruguay was the first country in Latin America to have free zones. The first law is from 1923, so we've been in this business for quite a while.
Wow, 1923, the first law.
Yeah, the first law for free zones, and the first two free zones in the country are from 1923. Of course, this had a huge impulse after 1987, when we had a new free trade zone law, which encouraged private investors to develop free zones in the country. And that's when the regime really bloomed and moved from pure logistics and industrial to services, logistics and industrial as well. But it really had a much more impact from 1987 onwards.
That's great. So 14 free trade zones in Uruguay. You are on the, I guess you're the chair of the board, I think, right, of the Uruguayan Chamber of Free Trade Zones. I guess that's probably some kind of group that connects all the different free trade zones. And does it oversee them? What role do they play?
Yeah, what we try to do is to defend and promote the free trade zone regime in Uruguay. And we try to centralize all our needs there and go and talk to the government and talk to international organisms, etc., to make sure that we are doing everything we need to do to have a really a successful free trade zone regime in Uruguay.
That's great. Well, so tell us a little bit. Parque de las Ciencias is the one that you oversee as well and that you run. I'd like to know a few things. First of all, can you tell us the significance of the name? I guess in English that reads Park of the Sciences, right? And so what kind of companies are there? And again, what's the significance of the name?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the name is related to probably the anchor client that we have here at the park, which is a pharma company. And also the main target that we have here, and the main scope, or where we put our biggest energy, and that's to go after companies doing activities related to life sciences, high technology, high added value activities, where we think that the future of a country like Uruguay should be. We're only 3.5 million people here. So we need to have skilled human resources. We need to get into knowledge generation activities, high added value activities. And that's where we think the future of a country like Uruguay should be focused on. And that's why the name, and that's why we put all our energy there, even when this is not an exclusive park only for science activities. We like to host any activity that comes into the park, or any company bringing something into the park. Of course, it needs to be compatible with this main target that we have. But as long as it is, and they can all live inside the park and peacefully inside the park, we have financial activities, professional services, logistics, traders of raw materials, industrials of different sectors, of course, pharma companies. So there's a little bit of everything here, but our main focus is still on science-related activities.
So is that main company you cited, is that Mega Labs?
Yeah, it's Mega Labs. Mega Labs had a huge project for Uruguay, and a really unique project, because they were planning to have in Uruguay a manufacturing site of pharma products, which is completely out of scale if you look at the Uruguayan market. So it made no sense to have that sort of manufacturing site in Uruguay if it wasn't under the free trade zone regime. So the park was designed to be able to provide all the services that a highly complex industry like Mega Labs or other pharma industry plants need. So everything around the plant is up to the standards of the pharma industry, and the park was designed to comply with that. And being this a highly complex industry, we think that we are able of hosting many other companies or industries that are not so complex.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we had an opportunity to tour some of the Mega Labs facility. It was really unique experience to see a pharma manufacturing company, and just it was huge, by the way, and all everything that was going on back there. Really, really neat experience. Uh, so you mentioned too, like kind of the labor. I wanted to get into this a little bit in terms of maybe the numbers as well. So for a company to say, let's say a U.S. company or any company that's foreign to Uruguay that wants to relocate and locate into a free trade zone in Uruguay like yours, what are the benefits to the maybe the individuals that the foreign workers coming, and also to the company itself, and then what is the benefit to Uruguay?
Perfect. Um, I'll start by the benefit for to Uruguay. The law here requires that you have 75% of your payroll. It should be nationals. Okay, you can ask for an exemption on that and take it down to 50 or even go under it if you justify that you need to bring the know-how from abroad and that the people that handle the business are foreigners. But they will ask you that at certain point you convey with that requirements to make sure that the free trade zone regime is generating employment for Uruguayans, which is one of the objectives of having this sort of instruments.
Mm-hmm.
That's for a country. And if today we take a look at what the free trade zones are generating, we have around 30,000 jobs between direct and indirect employees, which is quite a bit for Uruguay. And this is without counting some of the latest companies that we are starting operations under free trade zones, like the third paper mill that we have in the center of the country, which is going to generate a lot of employment as well. So the numbers are really good, and for a country like Uruguay with 3.5 million people is really significant from that point of view. If you see it from a foreigner's point of view, you have the chance of coming down here, not only work from Uruguay, but also live in Uruguay. This is a really nice country to live in. It's really peaceful. It's easy to move around. We have quite a bit of coast. We're close to Buenos Aires in Argentina. We're close to Sao Paulo in Brazil. So it's becoming a really interesting place for foreigners to come and live here. Maybe 10 years ago, people coming here were mostly Argentinians, and now it's surprising how many United States citizens and European citizens were coming down here. And if you come and work for a free trade zone user, which is a company operating under the free trade zone regime, you're going to have also some tax benefits. For example, you can decide not to be included in the social security system of Uruguay. So you're not going to get deducted money from your wage or from your salary to pay to the social security system in Uruguay, and the company doesn't have to pay either. So that's a benefit that you're going to get much more money.
That's
And
great because I've been in some rooms where I've asked some U.S. politicians, can you let me as a younger, well, this was 10 years ago. I'm getting a little older now, but but still as a younger worker, to opt out of Social Security, like I'll take care of my retirement. Nope, can't do it. It's a Ponzi scheme, is what John McCain told me actually in a town hall meeting. The late John McCain now, but I mean he was being honest, but it's yeah. So this is something where that is not deducted out of. That's one of the benefits if you don't, and that's a choice, right? You can choose to be part of it or
yeah,
not.
exactly. You can choose whether to be included or not in the social security system of Uruguay, or just to keep the one you have in your home country and just not be incorporated here. And the second option that you have, if you do that, you can also decide to be taxed on a 12% flat on your income. So you will be taxed as a non-resident, even when you're living here in Uruguay. And those two benefits are currently only for foreigners being employed by free trade zone user companies, not in the rest of the territory.
Yeah, that's great. And then the companies themselves, there's no taxes that they pay in Uruguay, right?
Correct. For the companies, you have a zero tax regime, which is really interesting. And not only you have it, but the Uruguayan government guarantees that you will have it for as long as you have a free trade zone user agreement in place. So the state is guaranteeing that no one will be messing up with your tax obligations during the term of your agreement, and that you will be exempted from any national taxes created or to be created during the term of your agreement. That gives you a lot of visibility and stability on your tax planning for the future years. And it's a huge benefit. So it's tax benefits, but it's also legal security on those tax benefits. This, of course, is regardless of any OCDE, minimum global tax, etc. That's a different story. But in Uruguay, you're gonna be able to be sure that you're not going to be taxed on your activities performed under the free trade zone regime and complying with the free trade zone regime requirements.
That's great. Well, I assume most of my audience is probably, well, not in Uruguay and mostly probably in the United States and probably have a hard time figuring out where Uruguay is on the map. Most people kind of know where Brazil is because it's huge and know where Argentina is, which is kind of right under there. It's at the very bottom of South America. And Uruguay's kind of squeezed in right there. It's got a beautiful coastline, though. And like you said, it's a ferry ride away from Buenos Aires. I think it was about a 2.5 hour ferry from Montevideo and about an hour and 15-minute ferry from Colonia. So you're in Montevideo where you're at, and that's the largest city. So 3.5 million people live in Uruguay, roughly, and about half the population, I believe, or is it more than that, lives within the Montevideo metro area. Is that correct?
That's correct. Almost half of the population of Uruguay is in Montevideo or around the city. The interesting thing of Uruguay is exactly what you mentioned, is that the hinterland of Uruguay is much bigger than Uruguay itself. So if in a 3-hour flight, you can be in almost 70% of the GDP of Latin America, and the population around a 3-hour flight from Uruguay is probably 300 million or more. So that's why we promote so much Uruguay as the gateway of the region. You can be in a very manageable, stable, predictable country, and very close to these big economies like the Argentinian and the Brazilian ones.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to point out, right? Because a lot of Latin America has a reputation of being very unstable, whether it be politically or economically, and a lot of people have real anxiety about investing in places in Latin America because they don't know what's going to happen next. Some countries better than others, but my understanding is Uruguay is one of the most free market friendly, strong, most democratically strong country, not just in Latin America, but maybe in all of the Americas, even in comparison to the US and Canada. So, very, very strong place. Also, just for those who haven't been to Uruguay, like we were lucky to bring a great group there. We had a blast. We were there for 5 nights. Actually, I was there. A few of us were there a little longer for 7 nights because we came in for a conference ahead of time. But amazing steaks, both in Uruguay and Argentina. Great wine. I discovered the Tanat for the first time. It's a kind of wine, right? Argentina's famous for the Malbec. Uruguay's got the Tanat. So really beautiful landscapes too as you're driving across the country. And again, really nice beaches. And we had a beautiful sunset one night in Punta del Este from the Casa Museo Pueblo location. That was really spectacular. Something we will always remember, I know. So great country, great people, strong democracy, strong free markets. But with that said, because you have such a strong economy and you have a stable currency, and I would say, when I went to Buenos Aires or most of Argentina, the U.S. dollar goes really far in Argentina. Not so much in Uruguay. It seems pretty much the prices were about what we would expect in most places in the U.S. Nothing too crazy like going to Miami or Washington D.C. or New York, but like most of average America. But I would say because of that, how is like the with the stability of the country, how does that help or impact your ability to recruit or expand the free trade zone?
Um, your question is related to our economy and our currency and how how costly it may be to operating here in Uruguay.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is because it's such a strong economy already and such a free country already, what benefit, I guess, does the free trade zone add to that, or is because you're so strong? I mean, maybe it's more that you're able to recruit from nearby neighbors like Argentina and Brazil. Maybe companies are like, I need to get out of these countries and go boom right there to Uruguay. Um, I don't know. Does that help you in any sense? And I guess it doesn't. You're not recruiting from within Uruguay, right? So you're recruiting from outside. How does that help or impact?
Yeah, perfect. Now I understand perfectly the question. I think that in the long run we need a strong region, and it's not good for Uruguay that Argentina is having the problems that they have, and sometimes the changes in a big and strong economy like the Brazilian one. I think in the long run, we need a strong region, and these are huge export countries for us. So we need them to be strong for them to buy from us services, goods, etc. And we need very clear rules of the game. Sometimes it's been difficult for the Mercosur, which is the association that gathers the countries here in the South Cone, to be able to have clear rules of the game and respect them. So that I think is what the region the challenges of this region. Of course, and being Uruguay so stable and being Uruguay so predictable uh, and being a nice place to live in, we are receiving people coming from Argentina and from other countries of Latin America, Venezuela. So now we are receiving Chileans from Chile, and Chile was like the pearl, in South America for stability and predictability, etc. And it gave that place up. So now Uruguay is I think is number one in that ranking. So that's been favorable for Uruguay in certain point. We are receiving interesting workforce coming from these countries. We are receiving um, owners of companies coming to live in Uruguay and bringing their knowledge here and bringing their companies to the country. And this is really really clear in the technology industry. In Argentina, for example, from the I think the 11 unicorns that they had, I think only one is left there. And in Uruguay,
Hmm.
we have at least two or three from Argentina, and the owners are living here. So that generates quite an interesting environment where you have this really talented Argentinians that are always looking for new businesses to be on the frontier of knowledge, etc. In with the Uruguayan ecosystem, which is really good as well, and with clear rules of the game and predictability, and that gives us a really interesting combination. And the free trade zones need to play a main role there because we are the door opening for foreigners to be able to come here, enjoy all those benefits that we were talking about, being able to set their operations here, even when they're not thinking in the local market, they are thinking to the region or to the world, with complete freedom to handle their money. They can open bank accounts in US dollars. You don't have any problems in Uruguay moving in and out the money. You don't have any retention to pay dividends to foreign companies from here, foreign shareholders from here. no taxes in free trade zone. So yeah, I think we have an interesting portfolio of advantages and benefits to be able to continue to bring foreign investment and employment into the country.
Do you have like a general breakdown of where the foreign companies are coming from? Uh, would you, if you broke it down by percentage wise or something like that?
That's a good question, and I should be able to do it, but I don't have the number right now.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, I think that probably Argentinians are always really keen to invest in Uruguay. We've been having Argentinians coming to invest in Uruguay for many years now. Um, Now we have Chileans coming to invest in the country also, but U.S. companies and European countries companies are also coming into the country and investing. We have the biggest investments in the last 50 years of the country, maybe, which are the paper mills, and they are coming from Europe. So yeah, we have a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Now, there's been a lot in the news. We hear a lot about it as well with the with China's Silk Road project, with investments around the world, and also trying to have influence on a lot of countries. Are you seeing a lot of Chinese investment in Uruguay?
Yes, we are seeing Chinese investment in Uruguay mainly, and they've been investing here in the meat industry. Well, you enjoyed the good steak that we have here, but yeah, they've been investing in slaughterhouses and that sort of meat and food industry in general. Um, for free trade zones, we are starting to have much more investment coming from China, for example, in diagnostics and pharma. Yeah, there seems to be much more interest for China to invest down here than it was maybe 10 years ago.
When you mentioned the farms and the slaughterhouses and that kind of, is that for China simply as an investment, or is it also for them to be exporting that food back to China?
No, to export to China. China is our main export destination of food right now, meat and other, also soy and other food productions that we have here at the country. So it's a significant market for Uruguay right now.
Well, let's see. They got about 1.5 billion people. That's a lot of Uruguayan cows that they need.
Yeah,
Well,
different to what. No, the other thing I wanted to mention, for example, in services, which has become a really important export for Uruguay to export services, the
hmm.
United States is in number one. And in free trade zones and outside of the free trade zones, mainly for the software industry and technology industry, US is number one.
That's great. So that's a lot. That's probably like what I'm calling for a technical, with a software company or something. I might be reaching somebody that is based in Uruguay.
That's great.
Yeah. So speaking of that, I heard that Google might be coming into Parque de las Ciencias. Is that something they're looking at doing?
Yeah, well, Google announced, I think last year, that we had closed an agreement for them to have 30 hectares inside the park, and that's done. Um, we are really careful on what we say, because the company needs to do further announcements on how they are going to develop the project here, and we are waiting for that. But the park is already moving forward with the basic infrastructure for the 30 hectares, which is fencing, general lighting,
And
roads.
hectares, what is 30 hectares? Is that about 50 acres? Is that like
That's a good question. I
we don't need
need
to
to
see the
check
math.
my phone, but
But I
yeah,
just want to let listeners know that when you say hectares, you don't mean acres. But
yeah.
I think a hectare is larger than 1 acre. I think it's not quite two, but something in between.
I can check that. Let me see, and I can.
Well, while you're checking that, Enrique, I was wondering as well. I know about
Yeah,
75% of the workers. Oh, how did you get the hectare?
yeah. It's 1 hectare is 2.471 acres.
Oh, so it's more than two. Okay, so yeah, so that's you're looking at maybe 70 acres in the Parque de las Ciencias, possibly for Google. You're anticipating that they might be coming in there. I know business is business, and you got to let the businesses uh, market that and inform the world themselves. But I wanted to also ask you: with 75% of the workers in the free trade zones are required to be Uruguayan nationals. Now, I know you said there's some exceptions that can be made, but so that's obviously a great employer, right, for Uruguayan nationals that people that can get jobs from foreign companies coming in and investing in these free trade zones in Uruguay. How are have these companies experienced any skills gaps, or are they coming there specifically because they know Uruguayans can do that kind of work?
Yeah, going back to the percentages, the law establishes yes a 75 minimum. If you're coming to provide services, you can take it down to 50, and you can go under that in any case if you justify it, why you need to go under. Yeah, it depends what you're looking for. If you come to Uruguay right now and you're in the software industry or technology industry, well, I think it's a global issue, but you may find that there's more demand than offer. Um, if you come looking at life sciences and other highly skilled jobs, but not related to technology or software development, it's easier to find the human resources. What we always say is that if you're coming down here to do something, massive where you need thousands of jobs and you're not looking to have a highly skilled people and high wages and costs, maybe Uruguay is not the first option. If you're coming here to set some sort of operation where you need highly skilled people, you have a high added value industry and knowledge related, etc., this is a good country to come, and you will need to look for the human resources in some of those industries, but you have good chances of, of finding them, and we are
But
here to help with that, of course.
that's great. Yeah. So I wanted to get into that a little bit. So first of all, what was for you, Enrique, personally? What was your path to? You've been president of the Parque de la Ciencia since 2013, the free trade zone. I don't know how long the zone has been open itself, but what was sort of your career path to getting there? I assume you were born and raised in Uruguay.
Uh, yeah, I was born and raised here. Um, I started working as a lawyer, as a traditional lawyer, I would say, in a law firm, but quickly moved on to work for the pharma industry here in Uruguay. First in a Swiss company that then became German. Then I went on to work for Mega Labs, which was a Latin German owned company, and now it's 100% German. And it was in Mega Labs that we started to discuss the possibility of having a free zone focused on life sciences, and the result of that exercise was Parque de las Ciencias. Um, I first started working here as an in-house lawyer for Mega Labs, which is, as you saw, has its offices here. And then at a certain point, I moved on to work for the park, and it's been a huge experience and a big roller coaster, because it's like, I always say, it's like a Pandora box. You never know what's coming through the door. One day you may be talking to one company doing logistics. Day it's a pharma company, a technology company, a service provider, a cannabis producer. So it's so broad, the amount of activities that you get to receive, and companies from different activities, and that's really interesting. And for a lawyer, it's always a challenge because you're always learning new things. I'm not an engineer. I'm not coming from that sort of activity. So it's always learning, and it's always about problem solving. At the end of the day, it's what you need, what we can help you with to be able to bring your activities here into Uruguay in the first place, and hopefully into Parque de las Ciencias in the second. And it's all about trying to be a one-stop shop for the foreign investor and helping them with anything they need: human resources, investment, infrastructure, whatever, permissions, authorizations, etc., etc.
Well, I'm really glad you said it's all about problem solving, and I just want to focus the attention on that phrase because, that's something with over 125 guests now I've had on this podcast. I feel like that's one of the maybe the number one common characteristic that I see for many entrepreneurs and other innovators is problem solving. You've got to be able when you can solve problems for people, you create that you're basically able to then do something of value for them and help them be able to in your case bring solve all those problems so they can locate here. And I was going to ask you what your day to day is like. You kind of described maybe a broader view of the many different kinds of organizations and people and businesses that you work with or see on a variety of levels. You came in as a lawyer, so you mentioned you're not in the medical field or the science field, and you're dealing with a lot of science people. But you also didn't come in, I don't think, with a business management background. And I assume that that's probably the broader scope of what you do in terms of managing that whole park and interacting and interfacing with all these businesses, both in your park and maybe on the recruitment level. So how does what is like the day-to-day kind of look like other than the kinds of people you're working with? Like what are the responsibilities you have?
Yeah. Well, day to day here is a mix of things. It's looking for prospects to be able to let them know what we are doing down here, and first of all, let them know, as you said before, what's Uruguay, where it is located, what type of country it is, the benefits that we have for companies to come down here. I think that's the first thing that we need to do every day when we try to find new prospects. Then it's hopefully being able to receive people coming to a park like you did. It's a turning point. Once you come down here, you see what we are doing. It's very different to tell someone over the phone or over a Zoom conference what you're doing, but when you get them to come here, the experience is completely different, and for us is a complete turning point. The Probably the rest is dealing with the infrastructure. We are always taking care of our infrastructure, and in the in Parque de las Ciencias in particular, what we defend the most is the industrial capacity of our infrastructure. So we are always working on the capacity of our infrastructure. Of course, the buildings and the offices, etc., but also the roads for the heavy traffic, the fire extinguishing system that needs to be NFPA certified and have the adequate pressure in the pipelines for the different industries that we have, the water purifying plant, the water effluent plant. Sustainability is absolutely a key aspect for us. Only one example, but we are not sending any effluents to the public sewage system. We treat 100% of our effluent and we use it for irrigation. So we are completely sustainable and independent in that way, and we like to be like that.
That's great. I also noticed when we were there, you had a bunch of solar panels there as well. Are you creating some of your own energy?
Yeah, we're trying to create much more clean energy. We have the benefit here that Uruguay is working on clean energy and renewable energy on a high percentage. We have months where the country is almost completely working on renewable, so that's really good. And even when we are doing efforts on ourselves, on our side, to have much more and more energy being generated here, the country is already a good example of renewable energy, and that's really good for foreign companies to when they come down here. And just to conclude the idea, the only additional thing that we do, we are permanently interacting with organisms and authorizations, government authorizations, because we need permits from them, we need authorizations, etc. So That's probably the what takes the rest of the day, and the free trade zone chamber, which is where we all gather together. We put our common issues there, and we work as a whole to get the best free trade zone regime that we can for the country.
That's great. Well, so on that note, as brief as you can, what does success look like for you and your free trade zone in the next 5 years?
That's a really good question. I would say, yeah, success looks like continue to target the objectives of the free trade zone regime in Uruguay, which is bringing investment into the country. If it's, I would say, high added value, high tech, life science related, or highly skilled services, that's much better. If it's investment related to that sort of activities, much better, because I think again it's what the country really needs to for the future. It already has it, but it needs to really potentiate that sort of investments for the future. It's generating employment. We need to continue to generate employment for not only for locals here, Uruguayans, but also for immigration. That we need immigration. We need highly skilled immigration to come down to Uruguay and bring up their families here and become Uruguayans and work from Uruguay to the world. So that's the other objective that the free trade zone regime has, which is to bring foreigners into the country and to generate employment for them and also for the locals. And the rest is continue to increase the export of services and goods from Uruguay to the world. As I said before, the local market is small in scale, but the hinterland of Uruguay and in this global world, the potential of a country like Uruguay should be limited. If we have the people and we have the resources and we have the rules of the game very clear, etc., this should be a really, really attractive place to set up your operations, not only looking towards the region and Uruguay, but also looking towards the world.
Yeah, that's great, and a lot of room to spread out in Uruguay too, because we went through a lot of open land, a lot of farmland. So, are you familiar with some of the? Okay, so what we're talking about here is a free trade zone, but are you familiar with some of the free cities that are operating? That something like Prospera in Honduras. I don't know if you're familiar with that project, where the basically the country of Honduras through their constitution has given not only free trade but free governance to a very small area in Honduras to try to attract foreigners and foreign investment. I don't know if you're familiar with that, and if so, would you be have you shared any information or learned anything from them?
No, I'm familiar with the concept of free cities, but we don't have any projects here in Uruguay which are looking towards that sort of thing. But yes, I'm familiar with the concept. It's not something we have right now in Uruguay. Fortunately, this is a really transparent and well handled country with a really, as you said before, the rankings here are really good in transparency, in low corruption, in rules of the game being very clear, in having the very clear separation of powers, between the judicial, executive, and the Congress. So we don't need, I think, right now those sort of free cities to be able to continue our, prosperity pathway. But we are aware that these things are happening in other places.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's not something needed for Uruguay necessarily. And also, it sounds like the free trade zones itself are attracting a lot of great investment. You mentioned, I got one question here that I was thinking about there, and also as you were talking, in terms of when you were saying you need immigration or you want immigration. Such a small country, 3.5 million people. Is there ever any concerns or debates about if you have too much immigration that you could change the culture? Because, we have in the United States 330 million people, right? And we have a border crisis right now. We have tens of thousands of people coming over every week. And you have even people here with 330 million people saying, "Oh, too many immigrants might change the culture." Right? So with the country that's 3.5 million, are there ever any concerns that the immigrants, that too much migration into the country could be impacting the culture in a different way.
Not now, not now. I think that discussion is not on the table right now. Uruguay is much focused on generating high quality, highly skilled immigration, and I think that very valid concern is not on the table right now. We have plenty of space, and we need immigration to keep growing. So I think that is overcoming the other discussion right now. But yes, eventually it could be something to be discussed, but it's not on the table right now. No. And we
That's
have
great. Well, one of the things I really liked what you said a little earlier was there's nothing like coming to a place in person and seeing it for yourself. I try to really bring people to a lot of places through my Fearless Journeys community. So we had a great time on our my first ever as well, trip to Uruguay. And the people are great. The food is great. It's a great, strong economy, beautiful beaches, beautiful sunsets, great wine. We went to Bodega Garzon out there. Actually, what you said was also really interesting about you guys are really trying to do produce a lot of sustainable energy, whether that be solar panels that I saw at Parque de las Ciencias or out at Bodega Garzon, where it's very windy out there, and they said, yeah, that's why we have the windmills out there. So they're capturing some energy that way as well. So it seems like a country that's really moving forward in a really great direction. Something that you know can really be, I think, an example for other places, especially in Latin America. And I think there's nothing like looking over maybe the water from Buenos Aires or down the coast from Brazil and saying, yeah, they're getting something right over there in Uruguay on a smaller scale. They're a little smaller. We got bigger countries around them, but maybe we can look at this and I think part of the answer might be these free trade zones, which again, very innovative way to bring people and investment into the country, as well as uplift Uruguayans. Because as one of my questions was, well, wait, how does this affect Uruguayans? Well, 75% of the people here need to be you need to be employed that are Uruguayan, with some exceptions, and also the amount of capital investment that then comes into the country as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If we have, for example, in the free zone chamber, we have a study which shows that for every dollar that the Uruguayan government exempt from taxes to free zone user companies, they're getting six and going up to seven uh, in the economy. So why? Because we hire people that pay their taxes and consume goods and services in Uruguay to companies that are paying taxes. And they are also paying taxes when they do it because we have the VAT. We are also hiring services from local companies that pay taxes. The free zone developers are tax companies, and we also pay a one-time payment every year to the Uruguayan government to be able to have these sort of free zones in Uruguay. So that shows that $1 that they give up in taxes, it's generating six. So there's benefits all over the 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 the, the the existence of free zones in this sort of countries, and that's being shown. It's global. In fact, the 1 to 6 that resulted here in Uruguay is very similar to what Costa Rica has, Colombia has, and other countries around the world. So it's the free zones are really prosperity tools to be able to generate economic activities in countries, and we are very proud to have this sort of regime down here.
Well, Enrique, I really want to thank you for being on the Agents of Innovation podcast. Thanks for being an agent of innovation yourself. How can people reach you if they'd like to get in contact with you or your team?
Oh, they can do it through the web of Parque de las Ciencias. It's really easy to find. You will put Parque de las Ciencias Uruguay, because there are other parks, science parks around the world, and it may take you to other places. But if you put Uruguay, it's going to be for sure us.
Great. And I'll put some links in the show notes as well. So people are generally watching this on YouTube or Spotify, or listening on Spotify or Apple or anywhere else they get their podcasts. So wherever you're listening or watching, I hope you will like this episode, share it with somebody, and subscribe to the podcast so you can listen to more innovators like Enrique Buero from Montevideo, Uruguay. Thanks for being with us on the Agents of Innovation podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks to you, Francisco.